Mick Cronin keeps talking about how this team can't handle the physicality of the Big Ten. Well, what's the one troubling trend that's happened in all of UCLA's losses? Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for making this show your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for your support. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. For the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And where we get started today, UCLA is trying to get out of this slide. Lost 4 games. You're just like, dude, 4 games in a row, 5 of their last 6, even though one of those wins in that last 6-game stretch was a big quad 1 win. It includes the choke of a loss to North Carolina and then just 4 pretty dismal performances. And we keep harping on the same things. But Mick Cronin came out in his little practice day media session talking about how the physicality in the Big Ten, UCLA just not been able to match it, right? That's a very paraphrased version of what he said. It's different. It's more physical, as it was expected to be more physical. We're not just talking like, all right, you're going to go face Purdue's newest iteration of Zach Edey or, like all these different 7-footers. We're talking the physicality of travel. We're talking the physicality of what Mick Cronin is demanding to do, in addition to the physicality of playing your opponent. So there's an added physical element to traveling to all these places. But what is the one thing that has been consistent, seriously consistent for UCLA in all of their losses? Well, I went with a game-by-game comparison looking at what UCLA has done this season. It's like, okay, remember, they played terrible against New Mexico earlier in the year. They turned it over. You're like, okay. What do you talk about, Zach? And you're like, okay, what would they do? Well, then you look at Nebraska. They gave up a lot of free throws. Michigan, Maryland, Rutgers. Oh, let's not forget about that North Carolina game. And one thing became extremely apparent. Not every game did UCLA turn it over. Not every game did they turn it over like 30 times, all right? Against New Mexico, yeah, they turned it over 21 times. Against Maryland, they turned it over 21 times. But against Rutgers, against Michigan, they only turned it over a combined 15 times in those 2 games. So it's not the turnover bug. Even though they have their offensive inefficiencies, the defense is struggling where Cronin says, how can we defend without fouling? In all 6 of their losses, all 6 of them, their opponents have shot 21 or more free throws, at least 21 or more free throws. So that means at a minimum, looking at all their losses, they've given up 15 free points with the clock stopped, the inability for the Bruins to go run out on offense because they don't have full offensive sets that have been successful. And when UCLA runs this year, even if they're not qualified as fast break points, they're a much better team. They're a much better scoring team. And that's how they score those points off turnovers and generally shoot the ball a lot better. But in these stop-and-go type games where the Bruins are fouling, when they're in foul trouble, they can't get rebounds consistently. This can sometimes lead to a bucket and an extra trip for their opponents. And to really put this in perspective, UCLA has given up, I believe, what? I'm trying to take a quick look here. As a team, UCLA, they have allowed their opponents to shoot 328 free throws. All right, 328 free throws in this season. And when they give up 20 free throws per game in their losses, I looked at the national leaders in free throw attempts per game. So when you think about, all right, who are the national leaders in free throw attempts per game, the highest number is Winthrop. They averaged 30 free throws a game. That's nuts. Mind you, Winthrop just played I think a triple overtime game. So maybe that number is a little skewed because they shot like a bazillion free throws. But a large portion of these teams shoot in the top 50 almost 20 free throws per game. In the top 15% of the country, they shoot 20 free throws per game. So what UCLA is doing by allowing these teams to shoot so many free throws is giving every offense that they face a top 15% of the country, a top percentile of the country number statistically saying, hey, you're going to get this amount of free throws to what the best teams in the country are getting game in and game out. Whether it's what UCLA faced with Arizona, what they faced with North Carolina. Remember, those games were very, very close. The Bruins faced New Mexico, and you see 3 of the teams UCLA has faced, 2 of which were losses, 1 of which was a 1-score game. Those are teams in the top 50 in free throw attempts. In Iowa, I think I averaged out, did the math, about 18 free throws a game. So it's going to be crucial for a high-scoring Hawkeye squad is can the Bruins keep them off the foul line? Because when you're allowing teams to shoot free throws at a clip that only the best teams in the country do per game, like 20 free throws, UCLA, you're giving free points, you're stopping the clock, and you're hurting your offense. So when you're giving up 15 free points and the inability to score, which UCLA has right now, you're hurting your defensive metrics. The Bruins, I think, in the last few losses, it was quoted in the media availability, either by Sky Clark or Cronin or both, that they haven't had 40 deflections in a game, I think, in the new year. And they keep those stats better than I could, you could, but the 40 deflections is when UCLA is doing well. And now I like to think UCLA should be a good defense or a better defense without needing as many deflections. Cronin prides himself on if the ball's on the ground, if the ball's getting deflected, the pass, the shots, the rebound, everything is getting touched. That means it's not going to be a good offensive possession for their opponent. But when you foul, that's a free look at the bucket. Even if they're not making their free throws. Like Iowa's not even the best free throw shooting team. They shoot like 68% as a team. But still, if you're going to send them to the line 25, 30 times, that's going to give a high-scoring team a lot more opportunities to score and force UCLA to play half-court offense. And if they don't make threes, it is hard to watch at times, especially if Mac can't get to the cup and these guys aren't hitting their shots in man-to-man defense, face up against bigger players because UCLA tends to go small. That is what Cronin means when he's saying, hey, we're fouling too much. It's leading to free throws. Now, the one thing Cronin isn't necessarily saying, he's not saying we're the little brother, the new guy on the block with them, the Big Ten treating us bad, other than the Maryland game. Other than the Maryland game was what Cronin is trying to say, yeah, that we got done dirty in a sense. That's not what he said, but with him getting ejected and mad and calling out Jeffrey Anderson, the official of that game, that's what he said for that game particularly. But it's the fouls when they happen, like the Rutgers game, Kobe Johnson, his second foul all the way in the backcourt. It's the intent and the IQ, right? Are you going to foul a guy going up and make sure a bad free throw shooter shoots too? Like a big setter? That's a good foul. You're going to commit your 4th team foul in the first 5 minutes of the game in the backcourt and have your best defender sit on the bench for a large portion of the first half. That's where UCLA is losing some key guys to foul trouble and allowing teams to score while doing so. So while stopping the game, an ugly game for UCLA doesn't mean it's not a good flowing back and forth game up and down the court. It's more they knock the ball out of bounds. They steal the ball. The Bruins are one of the best teams at forcing turnovers, but you can't do that when you're fouling, and your best guys at forcing turnovers are fouling as well. If you've watched the games, when UCLA, even when they're successful, you looked at them and you're like, okay, there's times when they go through very strong stretches and times when they struggle offensively and they struggle defensively. Every single one of those moments when the Bruins go through a slump defensively and offensively, when they're ice cold like they did against Arizona, like they do generally against North Carolina or in any of these games, it's when they stop making shots. Okay, simple. That's as simple of a statement as I've said. And when the officiating tightens up. We saw in the Gonzaga game, all right, almost no whistles for that entire first half. And then all of a sudden we saw like 3 or 4 flagrant fouls in that UCLA Gonzaga game. In the second half, with 15 minutes to go, UCLA North Carolina had like an endless array of fouls called with 1 million free throws shot. And the Bruins couldn't make them. North Carolina made more and made more of their opportunities while the Bruins couldn't score. So when UCLA goes in cold stretches, the opponents shoot more free throws. Seems simple, but it's glaring to how bad the Bruins are when they foul too much and how much it harms their offense. Now against Iowa, they're going to kind of face a run and gun type team that can force turnovers, and we'll highlight that next on Locked On UCLA. Let me tell you about FanDuel, because from the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. All right. The FanDuel app, it's super easy to navigate, a variety of bets to keep every game exciting. When you win, you get paid instantly. You don't got to wait around for your winnings. And whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some excitement, FanDuel's got you covered. Visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, now let's highlight more of this UCLA-Iowa matchup, right? So Iowa, they can score. They will score. And I'm hoping in this game that UCLA can keep them to 20 points off their average, which is still a lot of points for what UCLA's season scoring defensive average is. Iowa averages 89.5 points per game. UCLA, you go look at them on the other end of the spectrum this year. UCLA, their opponents, are only scoring a total of 63 points. So if you meet in the middle, heavily slanted toward UCLA and hold Iowa to 70, then I think that would favor UCLA. And normally you've seen Iowa, if you've paid attention this year, they give up a lot of points. They've been very good at home. The only time they've lost was to, I believe, the number 2 or 3 team in the country, Iowa State, who I think came back and beat Iowa in front of a packed house. Okay, you can live with that loss if you're Iowa at home to your bitter rival, who's a top 2 or 3 team in the country that just beat Kansas by 17. But when Iowa's on the road, they just haven't exactly been the same team, and they have been woeful defensively. They gave up 78 points per game, including 99 to a USC team that's still rounding itself into its final potential in under the first-year head coach for Eric Musselman. All right, that's not even a team I think that is figuring it out, even though USC just beat Illinois, a pretty strong win against Iowa. UCLA is currently playing itself onto the bubble when it was clearly far away from the bubble it was in. But the more losses they accumulate, the wins like they need against the Iowas, the Washingtons, the USCs are going to help stack up UCLA's win total and make sure they don't stack up to 12 losses, which might push them out of the tournament entirely. I do believe in this team figuring it out, but you can't lose a game like this at home to Iowa and still expect the committee to give you the benefit of the doubt or the UCLA benefit of the doubt and slash you into the NCAA tournament, much to the outcries of everybody. Right now they're in. Until they lose 1 or 2 more games in a row, then they're in serious danger of missing the tournament. But the danger of losing this game comes from Iowa's ability to turn over the opposition. All right. UCLA forces about 18, 15 turnovers a game defensively. Iowa is pretty good at forcing turnovers as well. Kind of a run and gun team. They like to go up, shoot the 3, almost 40% as a team. 5 different players who shoot regularly and have made 18 or more threes or 15 or more threes and shoot it close to 40% or better. The Hawkeyes have, whether it's Peyton Sandford, you've got Josh Dix. They've got multiple guys on this roster who can lock and load from downtown. Sometimes they play the Olay defense, if you think about it. All right, we're going to get a turnover. If not, you might go get a bucket. But they know they can score. So what the Bruins have to do, despite Iowa's ability to get to the free throw line, they only shoot at 68%. The Bruins have to avoid fouling, muck up the game a little bit. What do I mean by that? That's where the deflections come in. That's where the deflection bone comes in for UCLA. Get your own turnovers, but you can't turn it over 20 times because the Bruins, if they avoid falling into Iowa's traps, falling into the turnover bug, and they play closer to how they did Rutgers-wise or against Michigan where they take care of the basketball, they will score at least 80 points in this game. If UCLA keeps the turnover number close to 10, 11-ish in this game, if even under 10 would be great. UCLA is going to score more than 75 points and possibly in the 80-point range in 40 minutes of basketball. They should. Iowa is not good defensively if you don't turn the ball over. And even if you do, you still might score a lot of points anyway. It's where UCLA can fall into that trap, and we've seen them this year. They just play ugly stretches of basketball as Cronin continues to search for the guy to make buckets, continues to search for that vocal leader. And UCLA is stuck with Dylan Andrews in a slump. Cronin is going to ride Andrews as long as he can, but Andrews was a little sick, and he is currently out of the starting line. That means there's Sky Clark, who's also a bit banged up. And then there's a true freshman, Trent Perry. So you don't have a good option right now with a healthy, reliable veteran option at point guard. All right. Maybe Clark can turn into a hybrid bucket getter and facilitator, where it seemed like he was kind of translating into that heading into the Nebraska game. But now everything's kind of spiraled a bit backwards. It's spiraled out of control, and we're going backwards a bit. As long as UCLA plays clean, smart basketball at home, they can win this game. When the game is supposed to be at Pauley Pavilion, Mick Cronin hasn't said anything. We haven't heard any information that the game will be any place other than Westwood, which is still currently under remote instruction with everybody away from campus right now, right? The women's game we'll talk about in a moment. That was played at Long Beach State. This game is supposed to be at UCLA, where the next 7 games are on the West Coast. Huge for a UCLA team that I think I just read. They've traveled like 7,000 plus miles. There, I think, or a lot of miles. They've had a lot of miles they've put on. Going to Lincoln and back, and then going to the East Coast and back. Bus trips. I think Cronin mentioned, as a California coach, he's the last few weeks been to Newark twice to go play games in New Jersey and New York, and then go play in Maryland. So the Bruins have played in 3 separate states on the East Coast, made a not exactly next door neighbor trip to the east to Nebraska, and come back to play 1 home game since the start of the new year. UCLA has only played 1 home game in the last 6 games, and they lost it. All right. Prior to that, they hadn't played home since close to mid-December when they played Prairie View A&M. So the Bruins need a home crowd and some hometown love with what's all going on right now. But they're not going to get the favor of the locals if they turn it over. Emphasis on keeping this turnover number down to 10 to 15. You might think I'm sounding like a broken record, but I trust in UCLA's defense in this game to hopefully run the Hawkeyes off the 3-point line, don't foul them as much, and get the deflections as much as they need. And I know this is tough, but I think UCLA will have a decent enough offensive game plan to meet Iowa's average total given up of 78 points per game. They give up on average 78 points per game. I think UCLA, even in the midst of all their struggles, can eclipse that number or get close to it. And this might be an uglier version in UCLA's favor of the Michigan game, where maybe Iowa runs out big early or UCLA runs big, a team comes back and the other team runs away with it. Could be that high-scoring affair where it goes back and forth like Michigan, UCLA. It's just not a 7-footer in the paint and a 7-footer at point guard that UCLA just can't defend. They have nothing to handle that. And Cronin, as much as he wants to go big, I think he'll lean on Bilodeau, who should have a bounce-back game, I think close to 18 to 20 points against Iowa, maybe get to the free throw line a bit more. And I'm expecting either Sky Clark or Eric Daly Jr. to hit 3 or more threes in this game and spark UCLA's three-point shooting. UCLA and their big wins, when you look at them, you go look at the losses, pretty ice-cold shooting-wise, and they foul a lot. In the same games where they've shot well from 3, they've won all their big games, like Gonzaga hitting 12 threes, like Oregon hitting 12 threes. Arizona, well, they didn't shoot well, but they kept Arizona off the line less than 20 times from the charity stripe. They did shoot it 19 times, but the Bruins played such good defense over the last 9 minutes that the Wildcats went ice cold. All right, so again, UCLA needs to ignite the three-point shooting torch, light it up, hit the 3, and go from downtown. Get ready to rock and roll, and then not turn it over as much. Now we're going to talk UCLA women's basketball, who is playing in Long Beach, or did play in Long Beach. And how'd it go? We'll talk about that because they struggled a bit against Penn State. This message is brought to you by Prize Picks, the place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions in winnings. Prize Picks has changed the game in daily fantasy sports. Whether it's the playoffs or the regular season, Prize Picks has made it easier than ever while enjoying all the football action. Now it's playoff time, and there's no better place to be and get in on the action than Prize Picks. Here's how it works. All you got to do is pick more or less on at least 2 players. Picks it, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. Yes, 1,000 times your money just by making a few simple picks. All right. Here are the hot takes you can go check out, right? Do you think this week in Prize Picks, is Lamar Jackson going to throw for more than 250 passing yards against the Bills? And is Travis Kelce, after a week off, going to get more than 70 receiving yards? Fun to predict, easy to play. And if you check out the Prize Picks Flex Play, you can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. Ready to run your game this football season? Download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege. You get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 just for playing. Don't wait. Take your game to the next level with Prize Picks. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, now we go to the UCLA women, who are still unbeaten. Hadn't played in a little over a week. Had their Northwestern game postponed, maybe canceled if they ever make that game up, because Northwestern didn't want to come west and play UCLA or USC with all the fire situation. So UCLA, with campus still being vacated, the fire's pretty close to an evacuation zone. The Bruins moved their game to the Walter Pyramid, their second such game this year where they've played in the Pyramid. The first time came in mid-December. Corey Close became the program's all-time winningest head coach. They beat the Beach by 50. It was a strong coronation for a coach who wants to take this UCLA program to new heights in the NCAA era. And I was like, okay, UCLA is playing a Penn State team that is under 500. They're winless in Big Ten. Start off, I think, 8-0. Even though it's a neutral site home game, the Bruins have played at this venue before. And then the Bruins struggle. I believe it was only the second time all year that UCLA was trailing after the first quarter. And they were against Penn State. I was like, are you serious right now? 19-17. Well, UCLA then wanted a big run at the end of the half and showcase why, hey, even with the rust, even with everything that's going on, even with the team that is not playing as well, the Bruins can, in the blink of an eye, turn a single-digit game into a big lead, and UCLA went into the half up 14 points, 16 in the fourth, and then Penn State kept fighting, scrapping, and clawing their way back in this game, and the Bruins eventually won this one 83-67, much closer than I would have liked, much closer than I would have anticipated when you add in the factor that, all right, they haven't played in a while, they are about to go on a big East Coast swing, and this is an opponent that was hungry, ready to go, waiting on the West Coast for a game after they played USC and Penn State, and the Lady Lions, despite their 0-7 start in Big Ten play, went right to it and gave the Bruins everything they could handle in this neutral site home game at the Pyramid. So my thought was, UCLA in this game, they're used to the Walter Pyramid, which can have an odd effect. It's a very spacious arena, maybe not behind the baskets, but it's a unique place to play. And if you don't play there all the time, maybe you go ice cold. And UCLA, the first time they played Long Beach, all right, yes, they dominated. Long Beach didn't have a player over 6'3". The Bruins were ice cold from downtown. They were 6 of 22, 27%. Not a good percentage. Not by any stretch. They went and played Penn State, and here's what's going to be a funny thing to hear. UCLA in this game went 7 of 25 from 3. Eerily similar, shooting 28%. So nearly identical numbers against two very different opponents from 3. So for some reason, UCLA just can't shoot it in the Pyramid from downtown. Now, the field goal percentage was way down. UCLA was able to take it to the beach in the paint. Now, Penn State, they have the size, they have the defense, they have the coaching. They're a Big Ten team. They're going to come and take it to UCLA. And they got Lauren Betts a little bit off her game, nothing too crazy. She still was 22-12, 7 blocks. So she was on triple-double watch, a steal and 4 assists, only 2 turnovers. And oh, by the way, 0 personal fouls. Tell me that's not dominance in the highest order for another double-double. I think she's at 10+, right? I think I know what place needs to sponsor her for an NIL deal with all she's been doing, right? With all those double-doubles. The Bruins with 4 points in players with points in double figures. You had Angela Dugalich, who has continued to evolve her mid-range shooting and become a consistent shooter. When the Bruins need a bucket, she's almost automatic. Little floater, mid-range, taller than most European player, and just knock it down. All right, more of an old school type player if you go back and watch all the old pro highlights of basketball. Kiki Rice didn't have to do too much. 10 points, 3 steals, 5 assists. And then Jaquez, 10 points, 7 rebounds, does quite a bit. What's interesting is UCLA struggled in this game despite only turning it over 8 times. And what Corey Close said about her defense was that they struggled even though they forced Penn State into 15 turnovers. It's not like Penn State hit a lot of threes, but they played well, and UCLA did a couple of interesting things early, and Penn State was knocking down those threes early. They hit a couple in the first quarter, just a couple in the third to get back in it, and fought their way as much as they could to keep the Bruins within striking distance, but never enough to challenge UCLA. Is this performance something to be worried about? No. Because if you look at Gardner's and London, well, Gardner didn't even play in the first UCLA game at Long Beach. You had London Jones, who I think is 3 of 15 from 3 in the Walter Pyramid. I think it's okay. You mix in a rust, you mix in everything that's going on, and the Bruins' best players still played, and they didn't turn it over. The rust wasn't from, oh, they played super sloppy. It's okay. They didn't shoot well in a gym that's not their own home gym against a team that was ready to take it to them and maybe catch the Bruins by surprise, which they did by having those extra days to game plan and being a little fresher like Penn State was, having played much sooner, much more recently than UCLA had. Now the Bruins embark on an East Coast trip, which includes playing the Baylor Bears, playing Baylor in New Jersey. Then they go take on Rutgers, with the final of those 3 games at the end of the next Sunday. 3 games in a 6-7 day span, where Maryland is going to be that tough game. That is, of the games coming up, the toughest opponent on the schedule. That Ohio State, I think they're coming early February. That will be a huge game where the Bruins are taking on a currently unbeaten Buckeyes team. I think they still might take that first loss before they face UCLA. And then they're going to eventually go to the Galen Center and take on USC for the first of 2, maybe more matchups this year that will define the women's college basketball season, depending on how UCLA and USC slot in the Big Ten and who gets the 1 seeds and who has to play South Carolina much sooner than expected in an NCAA tournament spot, going for the Elite 8 or the Sweet 16 or the Final 4. That can make the difference between this team playing UConn or something early or going deep. I don't think the Penn State performance is too much to write home about. I just thought they would be a bit more successful than they were, and that's saying something for a team that still won this game by 16 and didn't even turn it over that much. They didn't. Not at all. Now a test comes where, all right, this is their biggest East Coast swing of the season with the Coretta Scott King Classic and those 2 Big Ten games, most of those nationally televised, to what will be the eyes all on the Bruins in what will be their biggest game since the South Carolina game. Biggest games if Baylor comes to play as well. They won't be no slouch considering Penn State just gave the Bruins a game. Now, one thing I caught on the Peacock broadcast from the last night was how Dugalich might have an international tournament coming up, and that's coming during the USC games or the USC game. And it's maybe up in the air if she is going to go and play in those international FIBA tournaments or if she's going to stay and play against USC, because I think she would be a vital component to be missing, vital piece, if she's gone. Now, UCLA has multiple players that can come in and start. That would mean Arnsalo could start, maybe Gardner, but there's many players UCLA could throw in the starting lineup if need be. But you always want to keep your unit together when you're playing your biggest, best teams. But just something to take note of. Dugalich, just from what I heard on the Peacock broadcast, she might be missing that USC game coming up. And I think it's up in the air if she is or isn't. We'll have to get more after reading a little more about that, but something to know. But for now, East Coast swing. The men are coming home. They need all the support they can get at home. The women are ready to go embark on what might be their toughest road trip of this season. And we'll see how they do. All right. Till then, 8 clap time, baby. Hands up, Bruins. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA, fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked On UCLA. Zach signing off. Go Bruins.